All right, Zig coming in at the top. Today on the show we have Pete Francis. You might know him from Dispatch or his solo work, maybe his work with Barefoot Truth. Pete is a singer-songwriter whose career has held no bounds to genre, a trait that was seen with his work with Dispatch, who was a multi-genre band. Dispatch being also one of the biggest independent bands who for their breakup show had a free concert that brought over 100,000 people. Pete is an artist in every sense of the word, not shying away from any musical expression. He'll go from a funk track to a folk track to a rap track, a rock track, without any fear of breaking what he's known for, but fully embracing expression in a uniquely Pete way. After talking with Pete and seeing how much he loves the creation process and makes so much sense looking at his career and seeing all these different creative choices, because here's someone who just loves to make music, every aspect of it, even the beauty of the simple. And that's kind of, this conversation gets fairly philosophical, and we really get into the idea of the creation process. Pete has a new EP coming out. It's called Sun Fuzz. It comes out the 14th of May. Today is the 12th, so that's coming out on Friday. All streaming platforms. Do you hear that? Those are noodle purrs. Everybody knows here at Zig At The Gig, when we have a Zig At The Gig exclusive, we cue up the noodle purrs. So we have an exclusive sample sneak peek at Sun Fuzz. Check it out.
I'm making, I'm breaking new ground. It's been fun since day one. Now we keep on going up until we touch the sun. You know you are, don't let them tell you what to do. Change the rules, don't let them change you. You know you are, don't let them tell you what to do. Shout your love.
Sick, right? All right, that is our sneak peek at Sun Fuzz. It comes out Friday the 14th on all streaming platforms. The tracks we played were Sun Fuzz, the beginning chunk of it, the intro to The World Goes On, and Can't Tame a Lion, the outro, which is wicked. These were specific choices because we talk about them in the conversation, so now there's context. Pete has an EP that's already out. It's called Humble Down. It takes more of a singer-songwriter laid-back approach. We're going to listen to the song Can't Go On. Can't Go On off the EP Humble Down, out now. You heard a female voice on that. That was Katie, Pete's wife. Katie and Pete have this really rad art collective called Dragon Crest Collective, where they get all these different artists together and work on projects. You can follow them on Instagram and Facebook. They have some rad stuff cooking there. Many of you guys that know me know that Dispatch is a big deal to me, so this was a really incredible honor to chat with Pete for as long as we got to chat. I'm super excited to share this conversation with you, but before that, this podcast is mixed by Jay Sparrow from Studio 44 Cleveland. Studio 44 Cleveland, for any of your audio, streamed, and video needs, you can contact Jay from studio44cleveland at gmail.com or studio44 the numbers at Facebook. Also, if you can rate, review, comment, and share the podcast on all the podcasting platforms, it helps me keep talking to inspiring guests like Pete and sharing that inspiration with you. And if you can give us a like on the social medias like YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, that also helps. One more thing before we get into it. Pete is co-teaching a songwriting course at Middlebury College in 2021, and we kind of come in on that. So many of you guys know my backstory. I'm a full-time musician, playing a band called C Level, letter C dash, and I'm also a music teacher. So this interview starts off with teaching music. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Pete Francis.
Yeah, I'm actually, this year I'm teaching a songwriting class.
I saw that.
Yeah, at Middlebury College, where I went to school, and it's funny because it's with the teacher I had. I met her in 1994.
Yeah.
But we became close, and she's really, her name's Sue Leon Tan, and she's just amazing how she speaks to the students in a very positive way, and so I've been kind of learning from her, but I've always loved talking about, song construction and how songs come together or how they can be made better. So it's been really fun for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw that in your bio. I'm like, man, I haven't wanted to go back to college for continuing ed until I read that. I'm like, that'd be a sick course.
It's fun, man. And, you'd be really impressed with some of these. I guess they range from 19 to 21. Some are just, they're all talented in their own way, but some really have some really great lyrics and great voices. So far I'm really enjoying it.
Now, do you think, just to kind of dive into that, do you think like when you're younger, there's like more of this like fountain of creativity, and like as you work on your craft, you have to work harder to get to that like spot of like effortlessness?
I think there's some truth to that, because maybe when you're coming out of high school, and maybe in high school, for me, I always loved poetry. So early on, 8th or 9th grade, we had a poetry assignment, whether it was maybe Robert Frost or, I don't know if you remember that Irish poet, Seamus Heaney. Heaney won the Nobel Prize. So I think early on I had interest in that, but there may be, when we start creating, thoughts may come up, and that editor that maybe, gains steam as we progress as creative people, maybe gets a bit stronger. So if I were to speak for myself, I think some early songs like Mayday and maybe a couple other words that I wrote in high school. And then I remember saying, wow, I like just making up songs. And so one thing I talk to the kids about is I say, try to let ideas come out, and try to let these things without saying, well, I don't know if I like that, or what does that mean? And I think it's like playing catch,
Mm-hmm.
Soon the glove breaks in a little, and you say, you're throwing it to your friend on the yard. And, after a while, you're like, I'm playing catch, and my glove is broken in and my arm is pretty decent. And that's why I think in some ways that getting the creative process rolling, it sort of takes time like that. Some people may say that, well, how does that just come magically out of nowhere? And it is true that I think ideas, small ideas, and I talk to the students about fragments. I don't know, in your teaching, if you think about this, but you may say, hey, I have this fragment, this idea, and if I kind of link it onto that, it's almost like Legos or a jigsaw puzzle. Like, you can't complete the puzzle until you start putting a few pieces together.
Right.
And so I think that is, I think some people can maybe be a little hard on themselves at the beginning and say, oh, I can't really write a good song, or, I just don't know if and I would just say, it's important to have patience. It's very important to have patience for yourself as you're creating, and really not to try to be too judgmental. And I bet you'd be the first to tell me that these children and autistic children and children that you see, you may say ideas pop out and you're like, where the heck did that come from?
Yeah,
that was just straight up brilliant.
It's crazy, right? It's crazy that the little spark of like inspiration that means nothing can mean something to someone else's puzzle they're trying to figure out, or like something that you thought upon, and like it expands.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really good analogy for it, because I think creativity is something you have to practice to some degree, And like how the baseball analogy, you have to like get used to accepting what you got and trying to make it, and then being okay with like, we don't record that one, but I did that, right? I wrote that down.
Yeah. And there's a certain confidence that some people can sort of say, this is me, you know, and think of like Lou Reed and Walk on the Wild Side, that song. And, you know, we still hear that song on the radio. And I say to myself, all right, like, he's not singing.
Right.
He's not singing that. So you can't really say that he's a singer. But what is it about the arrangement, the upright bass, you know?
Yeah, the other bass.
The thing, the bass, remember the bass, and then the snare thing that's going on, and the women, the soul singers.
Right. So
that's where I think we come back to that idea of construction without being too judgmental on either even yourself or even someone else. And for all my years of being in a band, and maybe you can relate to this too, working with other people, people are very sensitive.
Yeah.
And we have our egos and we want to protect them. But I think part of becoming a good, you know, becoming creatively aware is you say, okay, what's going on here? What does he want? What can I give him? You know, it's not as much about taking away from people as it is giving.
Right.
And you don't always need to give them everything, but it is like to say, hey man, you know, that bass part is cool. Would you consider kind of these long whole football notes instead of that other part? And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with all my work with Dispatch, I mean, we started when we were 18, 19. So you can imagine everybody's sensitive and on their toes with everything. And then maybe as time went on, we say, all right, that's Pete and that's Brad. And even now with my solo work, I say, okay, that's that engineer. I know he does that. I don't need to push him too much on that. So my point is, I guess, talking about Lou Reed and these other things, that we're looking at the whole,
right,
rather than just saying, well, Lou Reed's voice, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for you, I think, taking on autistic kids, you must be very good at saying you're looking at people's strengths, right? You're not like, well, he can't do that and he can't do that. No. You know what I mean? You're like, that kid's talented, man.
Right.
You know?
Well, it's kind of a weird a lesson I've learned from an early guitar teacher. His name's George Hartwig. He said, because I started by going to open mic nights, right? And the whole thing was he would walk over and be like, now tell me 3 good things about this guy before you say 1 bad. And like, he was gonna but that lesson stuck with me, and like seeing everyone's strengths and trying to work towards that and build upon that is such, I think, an important skill set. And I imagine like, from your experience working with like, let's kind of step back and go like, so you started writing poetry and like, let's kind of build the narrative. You started writing poetry. When did soccer ruin the game and make music a thing?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I just was watching my 8-year-old daughter playing soccer.
Oh no. And
being flooded with all these memories. I really loved soccer, and I saw a black and white video of the famous Pelé playing soccer, the Brazilian star. And for whatever reason, I really related to him. I just thought, I don't know. I mean, they talk about poetry in sports, right? And you talk about some sort of elegance that Michael Jordan flying through the air just becomes this almost artistic, you know, magical experience. So early on, I think I was sort of taken by not only his playing, but his aura. He had a beautiful smile, and he was just kind of an amazing athlete. I think at the time, maybe in the 70s, it was probably him and Muhammad Ali who were kind of the most famous athletes in the world. I also saw, I'm not sure if you know, but there was a team called the Cosmos that were in, I guess they played in Giant Stadium, but around that time, soccer really boomed in the U.S. Now, I wasn't, this was before my time, but I still loved it. And you may remember Diego Maradona was a very famous Argentinian player. So soccer to me had this, I don't know what it was. It was something that, I know we talk about it as the game, but I also saw it as something mystical, that you could move like this and it'd be quite beautiful. So I really played soccer through, middle school and high school, and I was the captain of the team.
Nice.
And, I was just
putting in the work.
I love the team, man. I'll tell you, man, some of my favorite trips were in the van to the game. And you probably know about that camaraderie with your friends. Right. And I just miss that even to this day. Like I love that. And it's funny, just to skip ahead, to correlate being in the van with the band was a similar experience, because in a way these gigs were also like games, because our job was to win the people.
Yeah.
And it was, it's a similar, Brad, Chad, and I are all athletes, so we, I think, inherently understood that. But soccer had a big role for me. And then maybe I was 16, I got a guitar, and I'm the youngest of four by a lot. So one brother's 7 years older, one's 10 years older, and then my sister's 12 years older. But I listened to all their music. So out of one brother's room was Pink Floyd. Out of another brother's room was James Brown. My sister listened to Joni Mitchell and Ricky Lee Jones and, Paul Simon, James Taylor, Fleetwood Mac. And so I really just, as a kid, I remember being like, 5 or 6 playing with wooden blocks on the stairs and hearing that music coming from all the bedrooms. And I think I just loved it inherently from the very beginning. And they had albums, vinyl. So I remember holding Wish You Were Here, and that record cover, that wild one where one dude's on fire. Right. I'm like, what shaking is this? Shaking hands, So, and of course, my brothers and sister would show movies that I probably shouldn't have been watching, Mad Max and movies, and they were all kind of creative artists themselves.
Yeah.
And my sister was an actress and a dancer. My other brother Eric was a filmmaker. And then my cool brother who would drive motorcycles and ride, hang out with pretty girls and all that. His name is Leif. I'm half Swedish, so Leif is a Swedish name. Okay. And he was the cool brother in the band. And man, he was just so cool. Like, he never paid any attention to me, but I always was like, where's he going? What's he doing? Maybe he'll take me, he'll take me to band practice. And, being like, I don't know, 12 or 13 and, seeing older guys. And it was a different time then, drinking and whatever and doing their thing. But I think it planted seeds in me in a way, because I saw that I liked what a band was about. Right.
Was he a guitar player? Was he a bass?
He was a bass player.
Okay.
Yeah, and he loved Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I got to know about Flea even before Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out, like Uplift, Mofo, Party Plan, and Mother's Milk. So I started to know about the Red Hot Chili Peppers then, and Leif knew about it. And I just thought Flea was a very sort of philosophical bass player,
Right. Well, and he was listen to those guys talk. Listen to Flea describe a gig. It's the most beautiful sounding answer to a normal question.
Yes, he's a real artist, I think. And he and Anthony, and then of course John Frusciante.
Right.
I just thought they were always, particularly John Frusciante, as from my perspective as a guitar player, I thought he was a real original, But so, yeah, man, that was the beginning of soccer into, sorry, against water, soccer into music. I had these terrible ankle injuries, man. I had 2 operations on my right foot. and one operation on my left. And this is just in the matter of being 19 to 20. I literally spent most of my freshman year in Middlebury on crutches. I got so good at crutches, I didn't even have to use my feet. I could just walk on the crutches, and I got pretty strong upper body.
Right.
And in that year, I met Brad and Chad separately.
Right. With you were in separate bands with them, right?
Yeah. So Brad and I, that's the thing. I think one part that you should, maybe know about me is that I've always been willing to go up to people and say, do you want to try this? Do you want to do this? And I played a guitar okay. And I didn't even know that many cover songs, but I have a few of my songs. And I thought, I'm going to go to this guy, Brad, who I just met. And this was in maybe January of 1995. And I went over to his dorm room. He was 2 years older than me. I just said, I have a song. I said, you want to hear it? And he said, sure. And then a few people that heard it and then heard him and me singing came into the room. And we sang, and I have to tell you, man, it was really beautiful because the two voices together. And I think it's important for people to know, and many may know, that, Brad has sort of an innate understanding of harmony that is kind of like no one I've met. He just, I don't know. He doesn't even think about it. He could sing beautiful harmonies, Right. And that was that night. And I think we became friends. Wow. And then the other time was that Chad, he was a Feb, and that means that the students arrive in February. He spent the fall in Zimbabwe. So he was 18 in Zimbabwe. And here was this guy who came. I didn't know many kids that would do dreadlocks in their hair, and they, he had his own thing going. He wore blue overalls. He rarely wore shoes, and his acoustic guitar had 4 strings on it, and it wasn't really in tune. But he and I became good friends. And the story with sort of One Fell Swoop, and before that we had the name Wood River Bandits. We even had the name Silas. Yeah. Brad was a little bit hesitant to play with Chad, and I think the three of us as people pretty different. But I think I pushed for it, and I said, "Hey, why don't we try to be a band?" And we went one night down to the concert hall. Middlebury has a beautiful concert hall, beautiful. And back then, you could sneak in, and we knew how to click the door open to get into the concert hall.
That's so punk
And we
rock.
we went with our 2 or 3 acoustic guitars and played. I think we all realized that night that when the 3 voices came together, it was very special. Then after that, man, it was just playing.
That's amazing. There's definitely so neurologically, when you sing with somebody, your brain releases a chemical called oxytocin, right?
Right.
And
right.
Do you know about this? Have you?
Well, tell me.
Okay.
I don't.
But it only comes out with key emotional factors in life, like when you're in love with somebody, or when you have that family bond. And another time it happens is when you sing together. And I've listened to I've done quite a bit of research before talking to you today, and everyone says that moment you guys all sang together, that was when you knew this was going to go somewhere. And because those harmonies are tight. It's in
they're tight, yeah.
Listen to a live track Steeples off Gut the Van. Mm-hmm. When you guys do that scat thing,
right.
That was, I remember hearing that for the first time and being blown. I've never heard improv with a trio doing harmonies. This is insane. So to get to that level, and even with there's some videos of you guys just joking around, making up songs, something about a pig, fat old pig or whatever, and you guys, it sounds beautiful. It sounds like a legit thought out song, but it has to be joking around and just practicing like that and just being able to feel each other's or hear each other's spots vocally.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of that. I mean, we were still growing as musicians.
Right.
We were really kind of beginners. And Brad had really good rhythm, but he really started off playing drums like around 20.
That's amazing.
And he just had great rhythm. I think he watched drummers a lot. He really liked the drummer from the Samples, Jeep, who was that amazing, kind of like a Stuart Copeland with that beautiful hi-hat work and reggae drumming. And then, of course, Carter Beauford, he loved his drumming. The Dave Matthews drummer. And so this is kind of back to our theme, what we're talking about, kind of holding together the team. I mean, we didn't really have a star in the band, and we were working off each other. And when you're talking about that kind of vocal improv, or, Brad was a good beatboxer, so we'd beatbox, and there was... it was, I mean, that's that other thing where it's kind of fun to laugh at yourself, and it's kind of fun not to take things too seriously, but you can't always do it.
Yeah. You got to make
you got to make some serious,
some decisions.
But we had a lot of fun with that kind of, there was a frat house in Duke. And it said, you could play, but you got to play some good covers. And so we were like, well, what do we like? We're like, okay, well, we all love the Chili Peppers, and we love the Beastie Boys. And so when that record, Check Your Head, came out from the Beastie Boys, we thought, whoa, here these guys are. Not only can they rap, but now they're playing live instruments.
Yeah.
And that really struck a chord with us. And we thought, okay, we let's do some funk jams and let's do some rap. And we learned the Beastie Boys song Root Down.
Right. Okay.
You could get root down. I could get root down. And I think might have done a cover of it. But that really, I think that opened us up, because we said, all right, the acoustic thing's cool. We got teased a little bit at Middlebury, and they called us the Indigo Boys. Because, here we were singing and doing that. And we said, all right, well, I think we're tougher than that too. We can step that up a little bit. And then all these things, the first bass we bought was a $40 bass that we found in this guy's basement. I remember going to the music store and the guy saying, all right, putting some, electrical thing to check if the pickups still work. All those great stories of just kind of like
getting through.
Putting a band together. I borrowed my friend Jay Koob's drum kit that he played in high school. We used that drum kit on the Bang Bang record. So that was a fun part of the band in the early days for me, because we're putting it together, and being in a band is such an intense experience. But those years of when Bang Bang was recorded in 97, I think there was a certain camaraderie that we had. And that was a special time.
Right. And that record had like the mix of the first album with like some of the singer-songwriter aspects with the Bob Dylan twist of it's electric now, and explored those different feels. Now that you bring up that the Chili Pepper influence, you definitely hear that with like Who Are We Living For, that opening track.
Yes. Exactly.
That comes real clear.
I think we loved the Peppers. We loved Bob Marley. We loved, trying to think of the bands. Chad really brought Rage Against the Machine in, and I don't know. I was like, okay, let me check this out. Man, that band is like thunderous. I mean, they hit so hard. And Chad and I saw Rage Against the Machine at Jones Beach Amphitheater, like fourth row. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. Their power. the power they had was so intense, and we wanted that. We wanted that too. We wanted to hit really hard, and I think we of course admired Pearl Jam. It was funny. We went out to Seattle, and we recorded 3 songs with, I believe his name was Rick Parashar, but Rick produced 10.
No,
10 was
okay.
10 was recorded in his studio. Us in those early days, anything that related to Pearl Jam or Smashing Pumpkins or anything like that, we were like, let's do that.
Yeah.
So we flew out to Seattle. We didn't have that much money to even get equipment, so we actually bought an amp and a bass rig from Guitar Center with the plan of using it for the record and then returning it back to the store.
Oh, that's so sick.
That was like, I know, we snuck out with that. I felt kind of bad about that, but we pulled that off.
Right. Oh man, it's what you gotta do to get through. Like my bass player's done that.
These were the things that we did, but I always thought they were good stories.
That's awesome. Well, they kind of tie it in with the camaraderie, right, of the team mentality, and like going to relate everything through sports of what we kind of jumped in with. It's kind of like that. There's this mindset of determination, right, and self-discipline that's needed to be able to have a team. To have team mentality. I'm losing my brain. Like that to get through all that stuff. Like when the van breaks down, or when you can't return that bass amp, and you got to share everyone's tacos or whatever it is. To get through it. There's got to be that end goal of not even reaching for something, just reaching, trying to do it. This is being in it, and like hearing stories like that.
Man.
So cool.
I think you bring up a good point, because never in my wildest dreams would I thought that we were going to play these rooms that we end up playing years later.
Right.
The way I thought about it is that at the very beginning, I thought, wouldn't it be great to have better monitors and so that we could hear ourselves better? And imagine if we had an acoustic guitar that sounded, could project more. And so that was the kind of thing. It was these little battles. We weren't really thinking about a record deal. I mean, we thought about that a little, but we had to win these people over. And it was always amazing to walk into a gig and people kind of take a side glance at you and they don't know you that well. But if you hit home on a gig and you nail it, then these people, they love you.
The room changes.
It comes back to that oxytocin comment that has been squirted in their brain, and they're like, they want to hang out all night with you. And that was a part of that, man, and that was the transformation that would happen.
Was there having all those different influences, right, and having like the strong like sense of acoustic music and harmony and like songwriting, then jumping into this kind of rock, funk reggae mix? Doing booking the bill and getting in the venue like out of town for the first time and playing that room, was it hard to, with that much like a diversity musically, to even get the gig and to like appropriately like build build a crowd
build a crowd? Well, at the beginning, before the songs were really out, we were doing what I was just saying, like going into battle and playing and trying to win the people. When the CDs started to get out there, or Silent Steeples and Bang Bang, and people started to know the music.
Right.
And that, I think, would draw them to some venues or draw them to get more college gigs. And we played a lot of high schools. We even played morning assemblies.
No way.
We came in at 7 a.m. to a sleepy middle school, and we played a rock show, and they were up, all of them, up out of their seats, by 7:45.
That's sick. How do you go about booking high schools? Like, how does that come about?
I don't know. We would string gigs together. I almost think the gigs at those clubs they're cool too. We played a lot of clubs, but there was something, I don't know, there was something so raw,
right,
about just coming into a cafeteria,
right, and taking
and
it
a
over.
sound company coming in, and then the next thing you know, we're just like, we're jamming, you know.
It's like the rock and roll high school, you know what I mean? Taking over the school. It's so sick.
Yeah. So we had a lot of gigs like that. And believe me, man, we played colleges multiple times. I mean, I feel like we went to Williams College so many times. And then we go down south. Chad's sister went to Duke, and we went to Duke. And I had a friend at Princeton, and go to Princeton. And then we play at Teen Center. So we really took a lot of gigs.
Right. Well, it sounds like it's like when you're doing music, there seems to be, or even like with writing or any creative endeavor, it seems like if you want to do it in be fully immersed in it, you find like every avenue you can. And like, it sounds like that's exactly what you guys did.
Yeah. I think that kind of reflects on what you and I were talking at the beginning, is that these are kind of practice.
Right.
And I had a hard time performing at the beginning, and just some stage fright, or it was hard for me to look people in the eye when I was singing to them. So all of that, in a way, had to get worked out.
Right.
And for me, it took me a while before, I think, expressing an idea on the guitar, like a solo idea, really took me a while to sort of understand what it was. And it took me many years to say, what's my voice? You know, what's my voice with the guitar? You know, what do I,
you have a really,
and that's the part of it, you know?
Right. Well, I guess like it's the practice of doing it, right? It's putting the time in.
It is.
It's learning how to convey yourself, and you start off with just like talking. You start off with words as a 5-year-old, and then you use words like arduous as an adult. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah.
But like
no, that's a good point.
The kind of comment on your guitar playing, I've always noticed you do it looks like you don't use a pick. Like, right. And like you get like this really like cool, like snappy, like Frusciante-esque note choices, right? And like you can have these cool phrases that are made with that. Was there anything that led to that?
Yeah. Well, I tried playing with the pick, and I've done pick, you know, alternating picking, and I've worked at that. But I don't know what it is, man. I just feel more at home with my hand. And, you know, there's some guitar players like Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits. He did a lot of that, and Jeff Beck. And it's just like, let's see. I'm going to take my acoustic guitar here. You know, so then if I push.
Right. Yeah.
And these days, I used to play more with my thumb and my first finger.
Okay.
Now I do between my thumb and my middle finger, I do phrases. But I don't know if you know the guitar player Wes Montgomery.
Right. Yeah.
He played pretty much primarily with his thumb.
And he shreds.
But he would do, oh my God. That dude he's remarkable. But he did a thing that I don't do. But he kind of alternates his picking with his thumb, down, up.
Like the double thumbing Victor Wooten stuff.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, he does that too. So, yeah, that I you know, if I'm playing an acoustic guitar and I'm sort of really digging in, then I'll use a pick. But if I'm playing the electric guitar or maybe more quiet acoustic guitar, I just use my hand.
Yeah, no, it makes really cool phrases that sing. And I think part of that is because you're approaching it with that, like kind of that, I don't know if it's a Travis picking or what you would call it, but that's awesome.
Yeah, like when I was in high school, and that song Bridges.
Right.
So I learned that in high school, Travis picking, and
Okay.
then I applied that. But you know, a fun thing to talk about is, even with the kids, is that we don't always say that we're going to have a conversation with the guitar, in the sense of, you know, if I'm like, yo, Dave, what's going on, man? You know, and then, but if I'm saying, see, there, I'm thinking of a conversation. I'm not thinking, what's the next musical phrase? And I think people forget that sometimes, is that when you're playing, and again, at any skill level, you know, you might just be like, you know, so all of a sudden you change your mindset to being not necessarily, you know, just this kind of, you're like, what if I'm going to have a conversation, you know, or if you're a bird chirping in a tree, like there's like a sound and there's a rhythm. And I think that you can say that to kids, and you could say that, you know, I want you to have a conversation with your instrument. Well, what do you mean? Well, how do you say hello? When are we going to hang out later?
Right.
You're like, what I think that does is just kind of opens up our language. I
agree. No, it's interesting because drummers use that mentality a lot. Like drummers will, for fills, if it's not like, I'm sure Brad thought it the same way, or maybe if you sat on a kit and tried to figure some stuff out, there's like, instead of thinking like one and you know what I mean?
Right.
Bop boom, bada boom. What's I can't remember the phrasing for it.
Yeah. Pat boom, Debbie boom.
Right, Pat boom, Debbie boom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like with my students, we were doing triplets, right?
Yes. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
And I was for what was the kid brought up? Chipotle.
That's hilarious.
Like just finding things that make it make sense, because sometimes having a mnemonic device is going to resonate in your brain more than like one E and you know what I mean? It's supposed
exactly.
To, like, think like that.
But when it gets a little kind of too theoretical, it can be a little hard to explain.
Right.
And then I just thought that conversational thing, and even if you say, you know, I feel a little bit angry today, okay?
Right.
And I'm going to speak that anger, you know, through my instrument. And then I don't know if that works with you, with your kids, but you say, okay, if you're feeling that emotion, you know, how can that come through on your instrument?
Right.
And I think that, to me, it's a good way to channel feelings, you know?
Definitely. I'm trying to think. In October, we did scary music, right? So we learned how to make scales, right?
Yes.
And then we learned how to make them scary by adding the minor second. So.
Oh, cool. That's great.
You know, making it just crunchy and like.
Oh, that's great. Wow.
But, you know, it's just a way to, all the theory stuff is just ways to explain, make it sound scary in a very formulaic way. And like, do you, when you take a lead, right, is that kind of where are you thinking conversationally like that? Is that a common practice?
You know what, the thing that I think about more is to take my time, you know, and you really like, one thing, Oscar Peterson is a really remarkable pianist, and I don't know if you know his work, but take a look at a YouTube thing with him, and it's like, I mean, it's effortless, man, you know? But he said, there's a great quote of him saying that you should know those other instruments in your band, and you should know what they're saying and what they're doing. Because, you see, you can't always just be focusing on yourself and what you're going to say. In a sense, a musician needs to become a good listener.
Right. 100%.
And so then I think what Oscar Peterson may be saying, if he knows that drummer and what's happening on the hi-hat, and if he knows the keyboard is holding down those chords, you know, conversation in music is a really deep thing. It's just opposed to just sticking to parts, you know, and staying in your lane. So that's what I would encourage when you're soloing or you're thinking, is that, you know, where you're going to put your note. And Miles Davis was a master of this, right? Because he would, in his kind of modal jazz, I mean, he would put some of those notes and you're like, what? You know, on Kind of Blue. But think of the space.
Yeah. No,
I mean, next time you lay down a solo, like just hit
yeah.
And wait.
Let it hold
down.
There's
I think there's a fluidity that can happen.
I agree. No, definitely. I think with that whole concept of space and listen, one, you're doing music. The idea is to listen, you know, and like a lot of times there's this pressure of like, when you think of a guitar solo, there's certain cliches, expectations of what you're about to hear. It's going to shred, but that's not as musical, right? Victor Wooten's got this really cool book, The Music Lesson. Have you read that?
Yeah, I'm going to read that.
That's one book I keep going back to, like as far as like learning to think of music in like a different way that still applies, right? And there's this whole idea of like the big takeaway is listening, but there's this whole idea of like breathing, and Miles Davis does that for sure in the like everything and like So What, and like like there's just like one note that sticks out and then it resolves. You can hear the space of it, and then like his whole book takes those different elements of it. So like there's the loudest dynamic, and I use this with my students all the time. I'll say, do you know how to be the loudest you can possibly be and be heard by everybody? And they all look at me and I'll do this. And then they're all listening because it's silence. If you're silent, you hear everything. And and they get all mad. They're like, what are you doing? Just say it. But like, you know what I mean? The taking a look at those different type of elements and learning how to make them work with what you know already makes everything more musical. Yeah.
I think the really great thing a teacher can do is just for them to make the student realize how special they are.
100%.
And that's really, I think that's really, you know, even important with kids or people that are a little bit tentative or nervous about learning an instrument and not knowing much. I mean, I think we all want to be identified as special.
Yeah.
And we are. All of us are unique in our own way. But man, I've definitely stood on stages with musicians, jazz musicians that were way heavier than me and just knew way more than me. And honest, sometimes I would just not play or play a few things, and it could be a little embarrassing on stage, but you know, I kind of stepped into the fire with that. And I'm like, I think I'll just learn.
Yeah. No, I think that's what you do. You listen. Like you can only, as a person, right, you can only learn so much about one thing, and there's only so many avenues. There's a million avenues. I want to rephrase that you can, musically, that you can take. And what was it like you with Phil Keggy? Like what was the concert you guys had with that was the Hatch? Right, that guy.
He was remarkable.
So like, or like with the Barefoot Truth guys, how'd that come?
Yes,
to kind of like touch upon some of the solo stuff.
You know what? Great recording studio in Rhode Island, Lake West Recording, and our friend Jack Gauthier, who owns the studio and runs it. Dispatch did Bang Bang, then we did 4-Day Trials, and we came back. I've done many of my solo records there. Barefoot Truth, I think, heard that we had done music at Lake West. And then I can't remember exactly how, but we met them and I met them and I worked with them a bunch, and they're just great guys, really talented musicians. I did a solo tour with them, and we had great shows. We really filled a bunch of houses. One dude, Jay, he got into the Weisenborn guitars, and I think that those are the guitars that Ben Harper plays. What they're called,
the lap
Weisenborn.
steels.
Yeah, the lap steel.
Yeah.
He got great at that. I'm actually going to do a gig with him in June.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is he doing
they're great guys. Yeah.
Open C stuff, like a C6, like the country sounding lap steel? Or is it
yeah. You know, I good question on what he tunes the lap steel to. I don't know.
Okay.
Sometimes I tune to E major.
Right.
When I'm playing, I have a national. Well, it's not here. I play it. I'm putting a pickup in it, but
okay, cool.
It sounds beautiful. It's that metal guitar, and I use that song "Go Riding" off my record. So they say I use that guitar, and that is tuned to open G.
Okay.
So that's GBD. I guess GBD, or
right.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Repeats.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful tuning. Open D.
Right.
D-A-D, F sharp. AD is a cool tuning. I don't know if you mess around with those, but
yeah, no, I dabble in the open tuning bit.
Yeah, it's fun.
But yeah, so at that time, was that the Barefoot Truth record? That was after like your first two solo endeavors, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And we got together and we did Quinn the Eskimo, I think, by Dylan.
Right.
And then and then we did those guys, like I said, Will is a really good singer, front man. They were all good.
Was it with those first two records? Even that one, that was all like in a very short period of time. Like that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, with my solo work or with that
with your
particular
solo work.
record.
Like,
yes,
because So They Say came out, and then that same year, your second album came out,
Untold. Yeah.
Untold, and but yeah, that was so like at that time, was it 2000?
Yeah, that was 2001, 2001,
okay.
And then 2002 or 3, Untold came out. Yeah, but it was like that for many years. I've been kind of doing records consistently every couple years. Untold was great. That was also the basic tracks recorded at Jack's studio in Lake West. Then I finished it up in New York City. Man, you know, one of the favorite part about making these records is just I love playing with great musicians. I love learning from them and just seeing what kind of magic can happen in the studio and then the live thing. And I had a dear friend that passed named Paul Tillotson, and he also played with Dispatch and just kind of one of these guys who was an extraordinary keyboard pianist. And he just was one of these musicians who, in my opinion, was sort of a complete original. And he was quite a character and funny and sweet and hilarious. And so much of my journey, I think, has been about the people that I've gotten to work with. And now I work with my wife, Katie, and I'm not sure if you heard the Humble Down EP, but we did that together. And I mean, you must know all about this because you're working with kids and you're working with, and I think that dynamic of team, you know, when I was a kid, I was a catcher. I was the baseball catcher. And I felt like, man, getting behind there and looking at the team in front of me. I used to love that. So that may have been part of the reason I put Dispatch together. Right. It may have been part of the reason that I've done all these records. But really to what we're talking about today, it's sort of about our journey as musicians And that idea too, like it takes a while to be a musician and then say, as the thing is happening right now, I'm listening to what's going on.
Right.
I'm not waiting to play.
Yeah.
And I'm not when I'm playing. And I wanted to visit this point that you talked about was dynamics, because dynamics is just such a really huge part of music that I don't think they talk about enough, because too many bands, I'm sure Dispatch included, you come in playing too loud and then they hold the volume that's too loud for too long.
Fair point. Definitely.
And if you see some of the master jazz musicians, and if you see some men, they can get down to a whisper. They can get down. I think dynamics is super important to talk about with children and talk about with musicians, because everybody's like, how loud can I play?
Yeah.
And then, but you can, and I do this now. You can play with more intensity, quieter than you can as loud. Because once you create a groove, it doesn't matter how loud and quiet you are. Like once you create a groove and the groove is hot, the groove is really, doesn't matter if you're playing not quiet. And then the beauty is that you can, then your sense of volume. And it's funny, it applies when you're recording too. You don't want to clip or get close to it, because as the mixing and then mastering goes on, you want to kind of bring up those levels.
Right. It's an interesting point. I never thought of it like that with it. As far as like when you go in to record, you don't get too loud and you don't get too quiet. There's like a medium of the not being audible and not clipping. But live, it seems like it's the opposite. And like
well, yeah,
what I mean?
It's like everybody's so loud,
right?
And then you either have to put limiters on them, or you have to be like, how many countless, probably me included, guitar players, you're like, can you turn down, your Marshall's a little loud, and then, but next time you get with your band or whoever you're playing with, it's just like, all right, take a breath, and then let's start playing. Not like, how many times this is like with us and Dispatch in the early days. Like that's cool,
right?
At one point, but if you're like,
right,
so then you have room for people, and then you have room for what I'm saying is that the conversation. You see how I'm just I don't know.
I agree.
There's something satisfying. And man, it took me, I don't know, it maybe took me many, many, many years to understand that.
Because I even to tie it back to like your solo career, right? The first few albums, like it seems like you were writing so much and recording like it, and then you get to the movie We're All In, and that album's completely different. And like the dynamics of that record is so like after that it seems like each record was a really cool attempt at like a completely different form of music and like of writing and like being creative. And it seems like that was like the middle ground. It's just like was there a like kind of leading up to that, was there a thing that like inspired like this kind of change of approach and maybe like incorporating those dynamics and like more so than just like the regular band?
It's interesting to talk about the movie we were in, because I recorded that record in LA.
Yeah.
And it was funny, Beck's record Modern Guilt had kind of a large impact on me, and that wasn't really, I don't know, it wasn't too common of his. I just thought it was cool and I liked it. And then I got to work with a really great musician and songwriter named Jeff Trott, and Jeff wrote some of Sheryl Crow's biggest hits. If It Makes You Happy, Every Day is a Winding Road. And he had a studio in his house in Manhattan Beach. And he was cool, and he introduced me to some of the musicians that played with Beck on that record, Modern Guilt. So they played on my record, the movie we were in. So this was a bit outside of my comfort zone because I didn't know them.
Right.
And it was almost like kind of a hit for them, and they come in and do their thing.
Right, studio gig.
Yeah, but I like Jeff's sensibility. He's a really great guitar player too. I think he felt what I was writing, and he was encouraging to me. And I think there were some tracks on there that were really cool. You know, the opening track, Glue, was was fun to do. But, you know, you probably sense this familiar theme of me really loving to work with great musicians. And JMJ, Justin Meldell Johnson, is quite a famous bass player in LA. He played with Beck. So that was, you know, a lot of these times it kind of goes back to our thing we were talking about. Oh, you know, we got new monitors, new this, like a new musician or a new sound was always exciting to me. And so, yeah, that was definitely kind of a change of sound because I didn't do it at Jack's studio in Rhode Island. I went out to LA. And yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Was it that, and that make even like the discomfort, right, of recording with someone new? Like, I think there's like when you're recording vocals with somebody or someone's listening to you, got the cans on and they hear every breath you're taking, you know what I mean? Like, there's something like it's kind of the singing with the person, the oxytocin. I don't think it's the same effect, but with listening to music and like writing together in that way, you have to, you know, to be with someone completely new in a completely different place is like. But that record, I think that record, that was the first one I heard of your solo career, I think, that came out, like when I became aware of your music, which was like 2010?
Yeah, 10.
9?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Actually, we met in 2009 at a...
Oh, where did we meet?
Arts and Armory gig with Calling All Crows.
Oh, cool.
Like
That's right.
And so it was at that point was like with the solo career, you're diving into more vast sounds, and like what came after, I think, expanded upon that. So it was kind of working with these guys and learning new tricks of the trade, and like kind of like working with like people that have different phrases, like, and just even verbally, like if I hang out with someone long enough that says something one way, I find myself using that term in another conversation. Did that kind of pan out for the like next few records?
Well, let's see. So I think I made Immortal Implosego after that, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that was a really wild record. And I think in many ways, I think of it as sort of like jazz kind of improvisation. I mean, I know I'm considered like a rock musician or folk singer, but jazz, and particularly jazz improvisation, has always kind of had a big part in my life, the way I think about music. If I think about John Coltrane or I think about Miles and Wes Montgomery or some of these, I don't know, there's a freedom. So in that way, I kind of just let my tongue loose, you know, and I just wrote a lot of things. And, you know, I mean, to delve a little bit into mental health, I you know, dealt with depression. And also when I was 31, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I didn't really understand. I didn't know what it meant. And I also had heard that it was called manic depressive disorder.
Right.
And during this time, I think I was a bit manic. So a lot of what I was writing may not have made total sense, but I also love abstraction, particularly in art. And so part of it was sort of abstraction with words. And so I learned a lot from that record. You know, there were some songs that I wrote that may have been pretty out there, but I wrote a song called Make It Bright, and that was about, you know, Patti Smith, a great writer. She wrote a book called, I think it's Just Kids or something, about her relationship with Robert Mapplethorpe. And that song's really about their relationship. And the book had a very profound effect on me, just because they're, you know, two really amazing artists and their conversation. So that song kind of encapsulated that. But some of the other stuff, some of the other songs were just like sort of me searching,
right?
You know, and maybe being lost, but and you know, with mania, as many artists will talk about, you can sort of be just a lot of information coming out, which may not make sense, but I still think that record's interesting. You know, I still admire it.
It's a great record
for what it is, but it was definitely a heavy time in my life.
So, sorry, I was going to say, like, kind of being in the mindset of what was like. Do you have like? Because I'm going to bring it back to this point, but do you have like a creative routine? Like, do you sit down and write every day for a little bit, or is there like a way that you practice being creative?
Well, I sort of, now I know I play guitar all day long.
Yeah.
I play as soon as I wake up in the morning. When my kids are eating breakfast, I play guitar. And to go back to when you were saying, well, when you're younger, do you have access to, and I think I still have access to that. You know, I'm not saying that I'm writing hits every day or anything like that, but I have access to, I know when something's cool. Right. You know, I know when I'm doing something and that I relate to that. And during the pandemic, I studied some guitar with different people, and some things almost I'm like way out of my league, you know, way out of my league. I'm like, well, you know, when we get into some theory and you're talking minor 7 flat 5, and like I understand this stuff, but I like it to a point, you know. I like it, and then I like letting go of it. So, but just to your question about writing, I have my iPhone and I write poetry or poetic ideas a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm in my studio right now, and to me, my guitars are my friends because I take care of them, I love them, and then they have different voices. So to think that it's always me coming up with the song, sometimes I think the guitar is coming up with the song, and the guitar is giving me something and something that it wants to say. And it's funny, I have a friend who I bought a bunch of guitars from in New York. His name is Zeke. And he handed me this J45, this Gibson. He goes, Pete, this guitar has songs in it.
Whoa.
And then, so I wrote that song Valentine that night that he gave me that song, that guitar, that I bought that guitar. So it's fun to think about that, because I think with our brains, we're always thinking like figuring out and technical in that. Right. And I guess I'm very interested in the spirit. You know, I'm very interested in, that's why I think I love poetry, because there is the spirit is living in the words, and music is living in the words. And sometimes in this world where we're very dictated by our eyes and what we're reading or this or that sometimes I think we have to be careful that we're not dislodged from the spirit, because the spirit is and the spirit doesn't have to be religion. Yeah. But the spirit can be like you and I. Here we are talking today. We both love music, right? And children and friends, and that to me is the inherent spirit. So that's what I try to be aware of as a creative person, because then to me life becomes sort of a conversation between things, animate and inanimate. And, like my guitar, and I feel if I take care of it and I put the dehumidifier in it, then the guitar is happy.
Right.
And my piano, I get my piano tuned.
Then when you need it, it works.
Yeah.
Right. Wow, that's a beautiful way to put it, because there is like even like I can't remember what Plato writing it is, where Socrates is trying to find who has truth, right? And the poet just is begifted these things and writes it down, and but doesn't know the truth. It just relays it, right? And I think I can't remember the end of that narrative, but it goes around to be the philosopher somehow.
Yeah.
But there's that with any creative endeavor, there is that kind of like spirit of how you put it that happens, and being there and being ready for it, and making it riding that wave through, and it comes out the song or it comes out the painting. That's a beautiful way how you put it.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, when you're with your children, and you probably would tell me this, there are these moments where they light up, and particularly I can see what my mom worked with autistic children, and
oh yeah,
my mom was a social worker.
Wow.
And she worked with some children very difficult, but I guess what I observe is that, to make someone feel special is an important part, because we're in a sort of self-centered world that everything is revolving around us, the individual.
Right.
But I think this relates to life and to music, just to get back to our conversation about Oscar Peterson.
Yeah.
And these musicians that, if you're very aware of the sound around you, then everyone in the band can control it, as opposed to just one controlling it. And that comes back to that volume thing, where I've seen some bands where it's just like, oh my God, it's just so loud for the whole set. And I kind of like when it, you shouldn't have to leave a concert with your ears hurting,
True. Unless it's that type of concert you go.
I guess unless maybe if it's Rage Against the Machine,
right?
It feels kind of good.
Then you kind of want your ears and your brain to hurt and your face to be melted. But
exactly,
typically, if you're not signing up for that, you don't want that from an Eagles concert.
True.
But so kind of being in this open, like, and having this creative diet, right, and being aware and always putting things out. Advocating for mental health like you did, I think is a really important thing. Especially because I
think, mental health is one of these things that, I feel like people think it's a prison sentence, know, and I think it's related to all of us in a way. And maybe a lot of this is coming out now: sexuality, race. And I just hope we can get to a place of acceptance.
Yeah.
That
100%.
Life can be quite hard. It can be hard to understand sexuality, can be hard to understand our race. And then it can be hard to understand illness.
Right.
But if you look at many creative people, some of the best have had to deal with bipolar disorder, or they've dealt with depression, and I don't feel so ashamed of it anymore, or feel like that. I've had to come to say and accept that that's part of me.
Yeah.
And once I've started to accept that, then a lot of the tension and agony kind of melts away, because I am accepting myself for who I am.
Yeah.
But I had fought that, I really fought that. And I said, I don't want to be that, or I'm manic and I'm behaving like this, or I'm very depressed. But this has been a long road for me. I've dealt with some very difficult OCD, and, but I just hope that we can accept each other for who we are. And then those moments of celebration have that much more glow,
right?
And to them, because we say, hey, we're in this together, and you might have something, or someone very close to you died, or someone teased you because of your sexuality, or and
we all feel
so
that. Those
we
things
feel that
right. Yeah. It's accepting. I mean, I guess all knowledge is eventually self-knowledge, right? And like acceptance of that is a big deal. And like, because I work with a lot of people that are learning to advocate for themselves. And when I read about your situation with Dispatch and how you were I was like, that's awesome. There's someone who's doing it. There's an example. Like a lot, and you have kids, and like, I mean, you're working with students now, teaching, and like, but you start to be the example, and that it's a difficult spot to be in sometimes, but it also like kind of puts things into perspective when someone else does it, and and really, really shows that that's how it should be done. Like, so that's, I think, what's amazing. Like, I don't want to just say amazing, but like, that's huge. That's such a big deal to do that and say that and be within that and accept that and move from that. And I agree.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to sound like this has been easy for me. I'm not. It's been hard, and no, I know you're not saying that, but I'm just trying to say, like, I've had to put time in therapy and being creative, and being creative is healing. But I think it is important for people to know in this interview that I didn't leave Dispatch just because of mental illness. That was part of it, and I wasn't well. But I think we grew apart musically. Okay. We grew apart, and that really is ultimately the reason where I left.
Gotcha. Sorry. I mean,
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, even like looking at your solo career compared to like some of the others, it sounds like you take more like kind of like adventurous choices. Like a Dragon Crest Collective is a completely different record than Untold. You know what I mean? Right. The grandmas are involved. No one includes the grandmas.
I know man, I think it might come back to the beginning of our conversation of being around my siblings.
Yeah.
And, my mom is Swedish, and my mom is an artist, and she came here as like in the 50s or late 50s. And she was a really amazing seamstress and worked in the garment district in New York. But my mom could play guitar and piano. And she's really a very artistic woman. So when I was making that kind of funny thing about grandmas, hearing all of this music, and the grandmas, of course, it's just hilarious.
Right.
I have some good friends, Paul Madison, Kenny Shaw, Dan Golden, and these guys. Maybe that's also a part of my personality. I love being silly, and I just think, I don't know, being silly to me, I mean, when we're, 75 and 80, we could still be silly.
Right. It's fun.
And
it's fun. It's fun to have fun.
Yeah. And I feel like our society and culture is in a moment of sort of real seriousness and shaming people and all of this. And I mean, maybe this had to happen, and maybe this Trump era of being this sort of outrageous reality TV star president had to happen. And we're like, but I hope it mellows out, and we say, you know what, we're people. We got to do the best to love each other and support. And when it comes to artists or children and autistic children and that have heightened emotions, to say to them that art and creativity can really be something to help them.
Definitely.
And I feel like in many aspects of society that if people allow themselves to be creative of whatever they're working on, I think it can bring a sense of calm.
Yeah, there's something to the completion, the thought and putting it into reality, right? Even if it's just you're drawing a new type of garbage system. I have a student that's obsessed with making a new garbage system for the school. Even if you draw, right? I don't know.
Yeah, why not?
Even if you draw that out and you make a chute that goes down to the basement, you know what I mean? With one of those weird PVC pipe, like even if it's that, there's something to being creative and that leading to something that exists, and knowing that you can manipulate your surroundings to something you wanted to see. I think you can reflect that internally. Mm-hmm. And that's I
think that's well said.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that we're talking about knowing ourselves.
Yeah, 100%.
And to be a good musician, you have to learn to know yourself.
Right.
Because if you're not aware of yourself, these sounds and these things are totally out of control.
Right.
But I think that very good musicians are very aware of not only themselves, but then they know and feel a friendship with the other musicians, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I think the Dalai Lama, he said some nice things about, going within and kind of, I guess he says, leave the outside as it is and go within. And that when I read that quote, I said, okay, well, how can I accept myself? How can I understand myself? And I think that's a major part of maturing as a person.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? Because we start to know ourselves, and then my dad was always a really good listener, and I feel like I learned that from him. He was really smart, and he read all day long. But
what was he reading? What was
he would read for first every day. He'd go get the New York Times like clockwork.
Yeah.
He just either I don't even know if it was delivered, but if we were on vacation, man. He was out getting a Cinnabon and a New York Times, and but then he was just a voracious reader. He knew so much about history. He knew, he was just, that word autodidact. It's it's somebody who just reads everything and learns everything. But I think I've applied that idea of listening to a lot of people, because you can learn a lot. You can learn more with questions than answers,
Definitely.
Definitely and that's always a fun thing.
Right. Well, and accepting that maybe you don't know, and moving, accepting that there is no, maybe you don't know that answer and trying to find it.
You don't know that answer. And musically, you may just not know what the hell that guy's doing.
Right.
But you're can I do something that supports something I don't know?
Was there so with the process of writing and hearing yourself and accepting this is what I sound like, and I'm going to shape it into what I want it to sound like? Was there when did you, are you still working on that process? Did you come to that at one point and you know what I mean? Everyone finds their range, everyone finds the kind of tone they have and builds with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now we're talking about finding your voice.
Right.
And now we're, when I did some group therapy in New York with a bunch of people, this one woman said, you have to learn that there's a voice that says life or this situation can be hard for you. So you find a voice within yourself that has compassion for yourself. And when that begins, then you allow the child to come out of you, because the child is very connected to the artist.
Yeah.
The child and the art. What the artist may have different than the child is the artist has the craft and the practice of the craft.
Yeah.
So you see, then the artist is not just a child, but Picasso would even talk about this, my daughter's paintings blow me away, and they blow me away more than a lot of paintings I see in museums, because she's there, and I'm sure with the kids that you work with. So allowing your artist to come out is allowing yourself to sound funny, to be out of tune, to say stupid, words that may be stupid. And that, to me, is part of the gathering, because as artists, you have to go and gather. If you're going into the forest and looking for every exact rock, I mean, maybe, but the gathering is really a part of the process. And I think ultimately part of the meditation of creating work. And I bet you may feel when you pick up your guitar and you say, all right, I have this D, and then I'm going to this E minor, and then the G, and then back to the C.
Right.
And then you have those words, and you're like, well, I wrote these words. Well, let me try those words.
Putting them in there. Okay.
And putting them in there.
Right.
And not being too tough on yourself.
Right. I think that it's beautifully said. And like, definitely the gathering, the idea of taking in so you can put out, right? Going out and being around people that can speak a more efficient dialect than maybe you can in whatever media you want to do. I think that all plays into it. And I think the gathering, the idea of that is a good illustration of that. And like,
well, if you're putting a band together, you're going to want to put people that know what they're doing.
Right. Well, and that goes back
you
to
don't want to be the only one that's knowing what they're doing.
Right.
And bossing them around.
Yeah.
That never works. But in a way, you're then guiding them, and you know that guy can lay the groove down. You know that other dude. But also, we're not saying that it has to be masterful playing, right? It's like, and this again comes back to creating a mosaic or creating something visually that you say, well, that square and that color. And that, I think, is part of, I just feel that that's not as difficult.
Right.
As opposed to always getting everything perfect or whatever that even means. And to me, it means you're squeezing out some of the life.
Right. Definitely. Because you're going for something and not just letting it happen.
And how many times have you heard where, oh, we were doing that and that was just a mistake and we were going to throw it out. And then you're like, oh, but that became...
That's paranoid.
I always love those stories like that. I love, oh, no, that was the part of the song that we were going to throw out. Now that's the hook.
It is crazy how like the ones that have the least amount of time and are just whims stick. Did you find that?
That's funny, isn't that the stories like that? Man, it was like Chad would have different songs and the general, like, I always remember it's fun to think of how his handwriting and the lyrics looked on the scrappy piece of paper for the general.
Yeah. And
then I think he had a tape recording of it and then hearing it. And I think I just loved it, and I loved a lot of, I loved Call My Name Out Loud and Flying Horses. Cause he wrote some of those when he was a teenager, and I wrote Two Coins and Mayday when I'm a teenager. And I don't know. I like the innocence of it.
Yeah.
And that what we're talking about, allowing the child
to come out,
to come out. And really you are inviting the child to come out. You have to remember, children just don't jump out and all of a sudden they're, some children are quite shy. And so that shy child may exist within us too.
It's interesting, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting. There's this approach to music therapy called the Nordoff Robbins approach. And I think they're based out of New York, but it's like an all improv based approach. And their whole thing is the musical child and allowing that to come out. And then it goes to the psychodynamic approach of what's the unconscious and making it conscious and self-actualization and moving from that. But it comes from the improv. And the more that seems to be just the creative like outlet is their kind of like their spiel. And just with the conversation we're having, that's coming to mind.
Absolutely. No. Yeah. It's I mean, improvisation is something I think we may be more connected to as children, and they do talk about unconscious and you know, and a lot of that come from Freud and Jung and these ideas of what are these voices. And, you know, one thing you might try is to wake yourself in the middle of the night with an alarm clock or something, and then don't do anything except write down exactly what comes out.
Oh, man.
And, you know, these types of things, man, you'd be surprised who's talking.
Yeah.
It may not be you or your conscious voice or what am I saying here? Or, you know, you think about a conversation or your mom or your dad, your brother, your sister, or your best friend.
Right.
Something they said right before you got off the phone. And then you go, oh man, that's a great line for a song. Or that's a great lyric. And I think that, you know, one song I was really proud of off Untold was Beneath the Fire. And it was about a father looking for his son, both firefighters in 9/11, and the father couldn't find his son.
Yeah.
And it was just, I don't know, man. I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, and so I knew people in 9/11 and knew dads or this, and so it's always been so close to my heart. And when I read that in the New York Times, I just thought it was just, I don't know. I read the lyric, and I think he said, I'm not going to leave until the last dustpan of dirt is picked up or something. And it was one of those things, you know, how like a father and a son and firefighters. But that there's an example of like something in the newspaper.
Right.
So I think artists also have to be kind of scavengers.
Right. Open,
you
to
know,
it.
and yeah. So part of our conversation today is also the recognition that you don't magically become an artist.
No.
I mean, some people like, oh, I feel artistic, but then the ones that I know it's like, I watched that masterclass about Leibowitz, the photographer, Annie Leibowitz. And she didn't really talk about it like, you know, I've got this amazing camera and I do this. And like, she talked about it as if she was fixing a refrigerator or something. And she was like, well, you know, I do that and then I do that. And then, so it had the sound to me of a craftsman.
Right. The practice.
So we practice and doing it. And I really like that. I really like that part of it because, you know, I've known other artists and, you know, painters, and one of my good friends is a painter, Bill Quigley, and he paints every day, man.
Yeah.
Bill did the artwork for my solo and Who Are We Living For? He did the painting on For So They Say. And,
oh, okay. Oh, cool.
Yeah. Oh, he's a great painter, you know, and he's just painting, you know, he's doing his thing. So
yeah, it's definitely interesting that it is this kind of like approach to like, there's the techniques, not the techniques, I don't want to call it that, the idea that it's a practice makes it seem reachable. Like, I don't know.
That's right.
I don't
That's
think
right.
I
Well,
could,
that's the part. Yes. Yep.
I don't think I could write a song as good as 2 coins, but I think I could wake up in the middle of the night and write something down and be like, what did that mean? You know what I mean? That's all.
Yeah, you don't know. I mean, like our process of how we create. I mean, even me, you know, I've written 2 coins, I've written some other songs. And I'm like, oh, well, what if a song like that? And that's the part where we have to say, all right, I can't be too judgmental or too tough on myself. Right. You know, I want to stay a creative person.
Yeah.
I want to be a creator. And I think being a creator, we can work through a lot of emotions.
Definitely.
Some emotions that are very hard, for anger and bitterness and love and jealousy and all these things, I think that we can allow to be worked out through creativity.
I think that's one of the only ways too, in a way, when it's your kind of medium, right? And if not, I think people find other ways to do it if their medium isn't like a straight ahead, like creative outlet.
Yeah, there aren't people like you and me or artists, or, people they don't really talk like this,
Right.
So this is how we interpret the world.
Right.
But I guess for creative or emotionally minded people, I would encourage creativity for the purpose of processing. Because I think that it's healthy.
Yeah, definitely. Even like now kind of thinking about it, and someone who doesn't have a creative outlet such as music or art, even just the idea of creating a narrative to have a conversation is that same kind of like process. So even to some degree,
yep.
there's that. That's
I
super
think that,
insightful.
Yeah, and children that may be, I'm sure you know a lot about this, that have a difficult time expressing their emotions or telling you that they're jealous or angry,
right?
Or that maybe they really like you and they don't know how to tell you that.
Yeah,
yeah. So I think that's. I learned a lot of that from my mom. I learned she was very accepting, and loving and open to people. And I think right now culturally we have a lot of guards up.
Right.
And I hope this may be a particular time in history, and it may come around, and maybe human behavior is always evolving, obviously. But particularly in the creative process, I think it's good to talk about relieving yourself.
Yeah.
That it has to be perfect. Or comparing yourself that, whatever. I want to write a song like Into the Mystic, like Van Morrison, one of my favorite songs. How do I write that? But then I say, okay. And this is the part where I think it's just about loving yourself and loving or supporting yourself too.
Yeah.
And say, I'm gonna wake up in the middle of the night. I don't know what the heck I was thinking. I'm writing about a rubber duck, but it's funny.
Yeah.
And that's why We Are the Grandmas and some of that, like, I don't know. I love that stuff too.
Right.
I don't know. I just do. I love it.
It's very,
so I just have to I have to say, well, I'm going to be the artist. And I guess I've always been this way. I just say, and I hope not in a standoffish way, but that I just like being who I am. And it allows me to be the artist that I want to be, because a lot of the artists that I know that I love have changed the world. And they've changed the world because of the love. Ultimately, creativity is love in a different form, coming out. And it's healing.
Definitely. And I think it's the love for yourself to be able to show that other people can do that too.
Exactly.
It kind of goes back to that idea of leading by example. If you can follow your bliss and come up with this amazing record, I can do that with my Lego towers. You know what I mean? Like, or whatever it is. And like that isn't possible until you see someone do that. Until you see someone achieve.
Yeah, or I mean, man, if you inspire someone, you've given them something.
Right.
You've given them something. That's very deep. If you write something powerful, if you say some certain words to a kid, you've given them something. And this is coming back to culture or society that I think people are taking from people. And it's like, well, wait a second. What if we create an environment that's a little bit more about giving? And not necessarily money or that, but, a nice gesture, a nice thing. And I think by that energy, the world, your magnetism, sort of there's positivity in your magnetism.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah.
And
it pays forward for sure. Like if you go out there and little things like you don't even think, and I'm sure you notice it with your kids, and little things you say or do completely make that day awesome. Now going down the slide is fun because, or now like in that, I think that pans off later in life being like when I'm sure the teacher you're working with now said something to you, because it's kind of very serendipitous that you're teaching where you met Brad and Chad, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of full circle in a way. But I'm sure she said something that resonated with you that along that journey helped carry you through.
It was, I got to tell you, man, she is a woman who says very positive, even if it's something she's eloquent and she's positive. And it's that kind of yes and approach.
Okay.
Not, no, Tommy, I don't know about that,
Yeah.
Yes, Tommy. And you may also think about this.
Right.
So it's a subtle difference, but it's a big difference, because it's, when you're teaching, you're then guiding and you're helping the student find his or her light.
Right.
And that's a very, it's an exciting thing, and I don't know if it's a U2 song or something. It's like getting out of the way of yourself.
Yeah.
Getting out of the way of yourself. And you'd be surprised, man. Dave, you start writing and doing stuff and just write in the notebook and like these things come out, play the chords together. And sometimes, man, I do play 4 chords over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And, that's how I wrote, Untold. I changed the key, but it's just A minor, G, F, C. And I was talking to my friend Dan about it, and I was like, he's like, man, so many of the best songs, they're like a few chords.
Right.
And so that's why I think, you can't expect a sculptor to whack the stone and all of a sudden, the statue of David pops out,
Yeah, no,
it's like, you know what I mean? So, right. And then the part of it is like, you know what? I dig this experience of playing these 4 chords over and over again. And, I think the process of a cycle is that it comes around. I thought I was my son Charlie played baseball. And I thought when I was younger, I played baseball, and you go around the bases. It's not like they invented 17 other bases out in the field. It's like, no, home, first, second, fourth, around.
Right.
So
yeah.
It's the kind of fun where you think of things that are just cyclical and you're okay with that. And so that means if you're sitting there tonight and you're just like, and you're playing E, sometimes you could just play E, right? Right now I'm just playing E major. And then if I play E major, and there's something really soulful about that. So that would be another thing I'd suggest about meditating on the simple.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And like you, lyrically, I've noticed you have a way of like describing a scene with a one line in simple terms that's really clear, but also very vague. Like,
yeah. Some of my favorite writers, James Joyce, the Irish writer.
Okay. Yeah.
He would describe, he might have a few lines about a room or a shadow. And I sort of like the idea that something is going to give you some specificity, but like what you were just saying, you allow maybe you, when you read that, how do you feel?
Right.
Not necessarily how I feel. And I think maybe some writing is too on the nose, right? Just so like written and or whatever. It might just get to be cliche. And so, this song I wrote, what's it called?
You got a lot of
Well, I think I say, I went up north into the empty woods. The moss was cold under my hand. So, okay, I mean, you're going north. Then in the moss, you may be in the forest and you put your hand down. But then the next line I say, I've flirted with dealers and devils too long. I finally found a woman who understands. So that it's poetic in the sense because there's this feeling of maybe putting the hand and then, but also where your hand may be on this cool moss, and you may have a reflective thought that maybe some of the people I've hung out with, and maybe I'm ready to move on from them.
Right.
Devils. So these devils said, maybe they were trouble. Dealers. What were they dealing? Some kind of, whatever trouble I was getting into. So those are kind of writing techniques that are fun to play with, because then you're creating your own language. And some people say, well, I don't know what your lyrics mean, Pete. And I say, okay, well, that's fair. But I mean, they can mean whatever you want them to mean,
Right.
I don't know what a sculpture means per se.
Right.
It's round and voluptuous. And so these things, man, I just find them very interesting.
Right.
I just find them interesting. I don't really need to know if I accomplished anything or whatever. I think I did accomplish something because if you make something that causes someone to think about other ideas, then you may, to go back to what we were saying earlier, you may have given them something.
Definitely.
For free.
Right.
For free.
Yeah. Definitely it's, if we're looking at that, like even with like the last Dispatch concert, you guys showed the world that an independent band can do it.
Without, man, I mean,
like not
that was maybe my favorite concert of my whole life. I don't know.
If it wasn't, I don't know.
It wasn't about business. It wasn't about business.
Right.
It wasn't about numbers. Those people were there. It was our little version of Woodstock in Boston. There were 60,000 people there at 11 a.m.
That's crazy.
And
yeah,
it was a beautiful day, man. It was a day. It's really sunny where I am right now. It's a beautiful day like today. And people were so happy. And we didn't even know what to think, man. But when we got up and played, it was something else. I can't even tell you. Madison Square Garden, of course, like for me, the first night, but none of those concerts touched that concert.
That one was, watching that documentary film you have with that. Like, I don't see how that anything could touch that. Like, that's
nothing.
Lightning in a bottle of an accomplishment.
Nothing will. To me, I might as well retire after that. I've just been like, that was it.
Well,
but
I mean,
I still like playing, so
yeah. Well, that's got to be what gets you through. Like, even when you're touring, you have one good gig that gets you through the next 5 shitty gigs. Like,
that's well said.
Like,
yeah, that's very true.
And
then you get a good musical moment. That's the part about you can't be too critical on yourself. I think a lot of artists who are creative, want to be creative people, they get hung up on that. And, I learned that. I mentioned my friend Paul Tillotson, who passed, and
yeah.
I wrote a song called Wonderful, and the first time we did it, we improvised it in his tiny little apartment on 6th Street. He was so small, but he had a grand piano in there, and he had a Murphy bed that pulled down from the side. And we're in there, and he had this like pretty shitty, like nylon string guitar.
Okay.
But it had a lot of soul, and
It worked.
It worked. And we wrote this song, Wonderful. And when he played the piano solo in the middle of it, he hit what sounded like really a long note. But then it was the note that was just the most powerful note in the song, because it was that note of being like, I don't know, shit happens.
Right.
And then you recognize that. And I don't know. Well, you and I have been having a very philosophical conversation, but everybody has to get rid of every little blemish that they have. And women have to change this. We have to change that. I don't even know what the hell we're doing. Right. So that's the example of
embracing,
enjoying,
right.
Embracing that, and really just to come back to the creative process of that being an important moment. Because that's that big word when you're not working with other musicians. Well, I guess you are sometimes, but I'm just talking about playing. You're playing when children play.
Right.
What are they doing?
Right.
They're playing. They're playing, man.
Go. It's fun.
Yeah, they're playing. And I think that was part of the reason why Dispatch succeeded, is that we knew how to play. Not necessarily, I'm saying the best musicians, but we knew how to be playful with each other. And I think that I have tried to take that philosophy with me in these other bands and other projects, and just, I think, loving art, loving music, and loving it. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's like allowing people to be who they are,
right.
as opposed to giving people problems because they are who they are.
That makes sense, because you embrace it and you accept it, and it doesn't become as a blemish as it is. It becomes Scott, you know what I mean? Like, or fill in the blank. It becomes that defining characteristic as opposed to that blemish. And like,
right.
An interesting bit from Victor's book is if you play a minor second, right? So if you play a C and a C sharp right next to each other, it's super dissonant, and the ratios don't work. Your brain doesn't like it. But if you flip it up and put it up an octave, it becomes a ninth, and now it's a cool sounding chord. Or even if you don't make it a minor second, make it just a second, right? And still, now it's a major ninth, and it's a beautiful chord. So it's kind of looking at that, and I guess it comes like the kind of cap everything. It comes to looking at who you are and what you've gone through, and how to analyze yourself and accept that and make it the beauty it is.
I think so, man. I thought times, why can't my mind not obsess about things? Why do I deal with this stuff? And then more and more recent, I just said, well, that's what it does.
Right.
And now I'm going to go and get a sandwich. And, now I'm going to take that energy. And that acceptance, I think, has helped me in my struggles, but conversely, it's helped me become a deeper musician, an artist, a writer. Because I think, we're aware of them, and then maybe we can recognize them in other people.
Yeah.
And then maybe we're not as critical of other people.
Because seeing that blemish is what it is on another person too. It's that flatted second. Now it's that
right.
Sharp,
exactly. What is that beautiful chord that he's doing, or what is it about him? His playing that.
So them.
I don't know. That's what makes us so unique. And being in a band, we're like, oh, that drummer, man, this dude is so funky, and his beat, it's just putting me in a good mood. And again, the most important word to me is the spirit, because I just feel like that's something that we can all relate to, the mystery of life. And I think there's a mystery to art, a mystery and that it may, represent the human soul. And the beauty, I think it's important for people to realize, no matter who they are or skill level or whatever, that they're special.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I bet the love and attention you give to your students, that's beautiful because you are helping them feel special.
Trying. But I agree with what you said.
Easy.
And like, it's celebrating that individualism as opposed to trying to make everyone normal, Is that kind of like shift it? Is that why you guys came up with this collective idea, you and your wife? This
yes,
Dragon Crest?
I live on a street called Hillcrest. My friend Paul said you should have dragons in your studio.
Yeah.
My sister found some rad dragon curtains.
Yeah.
And then Dragon Crest was born. And what I think it is Katie and I, we love art and collaboration. And she and I have always loved walking around New York and checking out the cool shops and going to the museum. And I think that wanted to be an extension of our lives. So with Dragon Crest, we both like to create, even if it's a cool hat or Katie designed a bandana.
Yeah.
It goes back to this idea of having a creative life.
Right.
And, us kind of, I like being a curator of artistic ideas. And so that's kind of our new and the other thing about art, man, which people don't realize, is that you don't have to be yourself per se with every art thing. Like that can be a part that's imagined. It doesn't have to be Dave all the time or Pete all the time. I think, and if you think of cultures in Africa or other where they're wearing masks or they're becoming stuff, it's like these characters and stuff can begin to exist. And I do think that supports a healthy creativity, because you're then saying, I can inhabit this kind of sound or image.
It's also your imagination, right? So even if you're imagining someone else's perspective, it's still to some degree part of you, even though you're taking yourself out of it.
Yeah.
And like, you probably learn more about yourself doing that. But so the collective is kind of just like, it's like your guys' extension into all these different fields and doing like art together. Yeah.
And also making records with all sorts of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really the main idea behind it, and hoping sometime to bring Dragon Crest Collective maybe to a certain town, and we would have maybe art and the music would be something that people would expect and be like, oh, cool. It's a Dragon Crest Collective event. So that's definitely part of it. And, probably just because Katie, I love singing and working on visual stuff, and Katie does a lot of beautiful art and painting and drawing, and she put together that album cover for Humble Down. We went down to the beach, and that's this new old truck we took, and the dogs were in the front seat.
That's awesome.
Then a graphic designer helped put one of her paintings in it and put the sunglasses on the dogs.
The image, the album covers for that and Sun Fuzz, there's a style to it, and it looks very visually appealing. So you guys are definitely doing a really good job with it.
Oh, thank you. I love funk music. Funk music always felt to be so inclusive, like black or white or whoever you are, and be like, get funky and dance. And and so, Bootsy Collins, I'm kind of wearing his glasses, but I just love that look.
And the tunes on Sun Fuzz, I know we haven't really talked about Humble Down or Sun Fuzz, so I think that was the time to do that. But I got the advance of Sun Fuzz, and like the first track kicks. Like it comes in with the funk. It lives up to the cover. I was like, oh shit. Because like the last one's like this beautiful, or Humble Down's like this beautiful, reflective, like acoustic record, and you and Katie's harmonies are so good, and like the song, the narrative you're telling with which, you know, with the tunes, it's like A and B. You know what I mean? It goes from like a very chill vibe
wild,
to
right?
like this psychedelic, like Parliament, Jimi Hendrix, like the scream on Let the Lion Out of the Cage is like punk as fuck. You know what I mean? Like it's a really diverse collection of songs, which is awesome. And
yeah,
like,
you know, I tried to make it all one record, and then I'm like, this has got to be 2 EPs. They do not go together. But that was great, man. I worked some of those songs I wrote 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Humble Down. That was a friend of mine's lyrics. He wrote the lyrics for Humble Down, and I put the arrangement together. The song Gimme Some Lovin', I wrote the chords and the hook, but another friend of mine wrote the verse lyrics. So this has brought some more collaboration than, particularly with lyrics, than I was used to.
Yeah.
But that's fun because, you know, I mean,
it goes into everything.
Think of like, you know, Elton John and his that co-writer and then the Grateful Dead and their writing. So
what about Can't Go On? Was that just a solo? Was that just you, or did you
Can't Go On? That was, I wrote that. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I wrote If I Break. And I wrote that one I forgot. I'm in love with you. I forget what that one's called. What else can I do?
Right. Okay. It's interesting kind of look at the 2 EPs together and like Can't Go On, right? And then you have The World Goes On, even though they're first and second tracks. So like with Sun Fuzz, was that more of so you had those tunes working like for a while, but the composition of those, like how each one song, like how it goes through so many different like instrumental like approaches, right? And it hits so many different things. To foresee that before doing it, I don't know. Like is that how it happened, or was it kind of like?
I don't think I really foresaw it.
Okay.
You know, the song And the World Goes On, the lyrics were written by a friend of mine named J Swag General. He's a rapper. And I was like, man, you know, I think you've like had kind of an intense childhood. Like, why don't you send me some lyrics about your life? And he wrote these lyrics, and I thought they were excellent. And I do always keep a lot of recordings in my iPhone. And I had one, And the World Goes On, like that in my iPhone. And I said, why don't we do this sort of bum, 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 the rap, you know, that.
Yeah.
And then I thought, I want to put like a Kid Rock chorus in it, you know?
Yeah.
And then whatever it is.
It just gets rocking.
Yeah, it gets rocking. So this kind of comes back to us like, let's be creative. Let's try. And I think early days in Dispatch, if you look at Open Up, these were songs that didn't like, what kind of song form is that?
Right.
And it was a bit of piecing things together. But this record, I did really put the rock and funk and rap ones on one record and the folk ones on another. Probably simply because I love all that kind of music. I mean,
yeah. Well,
I love folk to funk to rap to soul. Like, I love it all.
It blends together really good as two sets like that. Like, because the songs on Sun Fuzz fit really well together, almost to the point where they seem like it's a through line. Like, it seems like it's like if you're looking at a whole concept, because I spun that one a lot when I got the Advance. I'm like, what the? Because listening to the one that just Humble Down that came out, I'm like, okay, it's just so A to B, which is so badass. Are
you drawn to one EP over the other?
No, I like them both.
Yeah, you feel it. Yeah.
Because that's kind of like, because I did approached it like before really diving into really listened to both those two EPs, I listened to everything up until that to be able to talk about everything and have a fresh perspective. And like, it makes sense. Like just following your solo career up until the point and not even thinking about the Spatch stuff, but like, even if you include that too, it's like the highest level of like, that funk tune off Who Are We Living For? You know what I mean? Like is Sun Fuzz, like, because all the movements and all the vocoder and shit getting into some Zap style things, like it's so rad. So to hear it all come out, man. Like it's really, really a fucking rad record. So it was a pleasure to be able to spin it, man.
Oh, well, it's a real pleasure speaking with you today.
Oh yeah.
And
hey, thank you so much for chatting with me for like 2 hours. This was badass.
Oh yeah, well we had a great time, and I think I really appreciate the love for my music, and it means a lot for me as an artist, and I think that we touched a lot on kind of deeper parts of creativity and being a creative child, and,
right?
And, which I think is really good, and I hope that people are able to have these conversations.
Same.
Because
we're having it.
You know what I mean? I think we're having it, and it's a beautiful thing, because I think art and creativity are kind of the highest form of hope,
I agree. And it leads to it. It leads to finding out how to do that.
It does.
Thank you for hanging out with me, Pete. This was fucking awesome.
Oh, you're the man, dude. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Pete. I'll send you some stuff.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Later.